Hey, I wanted to put a couple disclaimers here up front. So first off, this video was written and recorded well before the release of Scarlet and Violet. So even though some of the speculation may be a little outdated, I think a lot of the video is still relevant, but keep that in mind. And as for the second disclaimer, this video lightly touches on some topics such as workplace abuse and crunch culture in the games business. Not heavily, but if that's not your jam, I just wanted to give a warning up front. But other than that, let's continue with the video. I should probably start this off on the right note. Okay, screw it. I love Pokemon. I feel like I need to state that out of the gate, since talking about this children's franchise on any platform is a bit tumultuous to say the least. So yeah, I love Pokemon. Bold, I know, it's only the most profitable franchise of all time. But also let me say this, I totally get it if you don't. I think a certain brown-haired white guy with glasses said it best when he said that Pokemon is really hard to get into if you don't grow up with it. I'll be the first to admit that a lot of my love and appreciation of the series comes from experiences from my childhood. And I think from the outside looking in, Pokemon looks like one of the most boring and formulaic video game franchises in the world. Why do so many people like these baby games made for babies and idiots? Well, Strawman, I created specifically for this video, while I don't think anyone has to explain why they like something, I do want to give my perspective a bit. I've been playing video games for about as long as I can remember. Aside from a plug-and-play Sonic game, the first game I really remember playing was Leaf Green on my GBA SP. Now, seeing as I could barely read and the most complicated motor function I could perform at the time was shoving rocks into my ear, I didn't get very far. But what I did see then was a world full of adventure, funny-looking creatures, and seemingly open possibilities. The idea that I could choose any 6 of these hundreds of cool guys and then take them on an epic journey was immediately engaging to me, causing me to replay every generation multiple times, restarting my save file to go through it all again. To this day, meeting your party members is still one of my favorite parts of any RPG, and I believe this series instilled that in me. I'm not even going into challenge runs or anything like that. I've never done a Nuzlocke, Wedlock, Scramble Challenge, Gauntlet Challenge, Wonderlock, Egg Trading, Team Rocket Challenge, No Free Health Care, the In Challenge, the Honor the Lowest Max Possible, the No Level Up Challenge. What the fuck is that? I just play them vanilla. I loved planning out the 6 guys I'm gonna catch, finding the fastest route to get them, and playing the game until I beat the Elite Four or the post game. So now that I've established where I'm coming from, I want to actually get to the point of this video. Recently, I did concurrent playthroughs of the 2 newest Pokemon games, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus. Playing through these games at the same time, one being as classic Pokemon as you could possibly get, and the other being this wild new step for the franchise, made me extremely discombobulated as a fan, to say the least. I felt like I was split into 2 different fucking beings. One yearning for the true perfection of the classic formula with all the quality of life features, and another wanting Pokemon to finally take a bold new step and shake up the formula. By the time I finished both these games, I had a lot of feelings on them and the future of the series, hence this video. I have positive and negative things to say about both of them, so I'm not playing any favorites here. In fact, I'll go ahead and say this. If I were to condense my complicated and heavily biased feelings on BDSP and Legends Arceus into a numeric score, I would give them both the same score. What that score is, I won't reveal until near the end of the video. So the way I want to format this vomit of thoughts and feelings on children's games goes like this. This will be a 3-part series where in part 1 I'll do a quick review of BDSP, and then in part 2 I'll do a slightly less quick review of Legends Arceus. And then in part 3 I'll give some thoughts on the future of the series, as well as tie up a lot of thoughts I had in the past 2 parts in a neat little bow, and explain how future releases can learn from these 2 games, providing Game Freak is actually given the opportunity to learn it all. Alright, I'm already getting ahead of myself. Fuck it, let's go. Okay, look, there's a reason why this section is called what it is. So let me put it like this. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are the best traditional Pokemon games on the Switch. Here's why. These games' only redeeming quality is the fact that you can see shiny Pokemon in the overworld. This is perhaps the most conflicted I've ever felt about a game in my life, and these are pretty good remakes of already great games. I don't have a galaxy brain take that'll make you reconsider everything you've ever thought about art in the universe. I like these games because I like traditional Pokemon. I'm also a Gen 4 baby, so I'm extremely biased. I replayed Diamond and Platinum at least 10 times over when I was a kid, and screamed my head off when I found out Lucario was in Smash Brothers. So I guess I can only get so mad at the game once the intro plays, and I'm back in Twin Leaf Town just like I was when I was 8 years old. Now that's not to say I don't have negative things to say about these games, but that'll wait until the end of this segment. Let's start off with the positives. Man, I just love Sinnoh. This is a weird ass region. I've always loved how much you go up and down and all around in these games. The fact they had to pass through Hearthome and not fight the gym leader until 2 whole badges later when you circle back to the town blew my fucking mind as a kid. The many cool ways they subvert the general Pokemon region layout in Gen 4 always impressed me. Also, the fact that Mount Coronet is a central landmark that you have to pass through multiple times throughout the main story really makes Sinnoh feel unique. Bit of an unscripted moment here, but I also wanted to point out the fact that this particular generation really dives deep into the mythology, and while I'm not usually like a lore person, I find that stuff really compelling when it's put into games that don't usually have it. Like, Elder Scrolls lore goes so deep and so crazy, but the fact that it's like a big RPG, like mega fucking fantasy thing, that doesn't really appeal to me. But the fact that they put that stuff in the Pokemon, that stuff really, I don't know, I just think it makes Generation 4 specifically special. Like, I know they did sort of the same thing in Gen 3, but I don't know, I've always loved the way that they implemented it here. Now, what does this have to do with the remake specifically? Not very much, honestly. But I think what the remake does do well is bring the region into the HD era in a solid way. That's right, I like the way the game looks. This is probably where my opinion differs from most of the people watching this video, and I get it. From a glance, and even in motion in a lot of instances, BDSP does not look stellar. Take a magnifying glass to any frame of this game and you will see muddy textures and generic looking graphics. But here's the thing, I kinda don't care. When it comes to media, I like to look at things from a distance and see things as a whole package, and not comb through every single minute detail. So when I look at BDSP as a whole, I really like the art style and vibe of it. First off, I'm a fan of the chibis. I think it was a really smart choice to have an extreme difference between the overworld and the end of battle models just like the originals. If they wanted to, they could have just made it like Gen 7 and have both be basically the same in terms of proportions, but they didn't. It wasn't any laziness on ICLA's part. This was a deliberate decision, and I respect them for it. And 2, I think a lot more care went into the fine details that people don't give the game enough credit for. Take the opening battle animations for example. These are amazingly well done and probably the best in the entire series. Each one gives the trainers way more personality than any text box could. Also, I really like the lighting. While I think they could have gone a little harder with the tilt shift look, some of these environments with the lighting look absolutely beautiful for what they are. And I guess finally, I just like how much they adapted the feel of the original games. Gen 4, especially the original Diamond and Pearl, are really chill and laid back games. And I think ICLA captured that pretty well in how little time they probably had. Man, a tail cut was a really inspired choice looking back on it. Look, I know it's cliche. I know everybody on the internet circle jerks about this character and this fight on a daily basis, but man, this has got to be one of my favorite fights in any JRPG. Cynthia is a fucking beast. Right at the tail end of the main story, the game does a fucking 180 and gives you one of the most challenging and fun battles you can ask for in one of these games. Look, most trainer battles are not very interesting if I'm being honest. Most of the time you will one-shot most of their Pokemon with your lead, steal their insurance money, and then go on your way. But this makes the trainer battles that do have a challenge knock you on your fucking ass by catching you off guard, and Cynthia is proof of that. Not only is her team well balanced in terms of type diversity and move pool, but in the remake they gave her BGC level AI that can and will guess every single move you make. If you're not prepared with a full team and a good enough spread, you will get your shit absolutely rocked. The battle I had with her felt like it came straight from the anime. You see, I had a strategy to save my Mamoswine for her Garchomp if I were to have any chance of beating it since it was so bulky. It came down to the last attack when both the Garchomp and my Mamoswine fainted at the same time, ending the battle. Now that's a fucking boss fight. Alright, now let's talk about the postgame. Post-games of Pokemon are pretty weird. It often feels like 50% of the game is hidden behind it, or 0.25% depending on the game. Luckily, BDSP falls into the former category with its post-game. You have catching the Lake Guardian, getting and catching the Ovalcharm, getting the National Dex and the Pokéradar, doing the Battle Tower, getting the Judge function, catching all the legendaries in Ramana's Park, catching Regigigas, Giratina, Cresselia, Heatran, and rebattling all the gym leaders and the Elite Four. That's not even including all the things you may have missed during the main game, like the Grand Underground, contests, completing the Pokédex, Poff and crap. You get the idea. There is no shortage of content here, and most of it is handled pretty well in the remake. The big addition here is Ramana's Park, which replaces Pal Park from the originals. This is a cool way to get all of these legendaries, having to get shards from the Grand Underground to activate these panels. Now, I have approximately 20 of each of these guys in Pokemon Home through years of excessive brain rot, so I skipped out on doing most of them, but it's cool it's here. Honestly, my favorite part of this particular postgame was the gym leader rematches. Every one of these was really fun, and I loved having an excuse to use my full team for more battles. Alright, I guess it's time to do something wholly unique on YouTube and criticize Pokemon. I'm also thinking of starting a bunkmain channel, may get into like arts and crafts, may get into, may do like a let's play, may fucking do some Twitch clips, I may, they go complain about women on YouTube. That seems like a good career path. I think I'll do like a reaction video where I guess I'll start with a few smaller points. Okay, why is the Poketech presented like this?
Hey, so in the middle of this segment, I found out that it's actually pronounced Poketch instead of Poketech. So if you hear me say that way during the segment, that's why. I guess the only excuse I have for myself is that it's probably a holdover from me misreading it as a child. And I never bothered to actually look it up. Because it's supposed to be like watch, but Poketch. But watch. Poketch. Poketch. Oh, whatever. Let's go back to the fucking video.
Obviously, with the Switch not having two screens, they couldn't have the Poketech have its exact function like it did in the original games. You have to press one of the triggers to bring it up, and then resize it, and then move around the slowest cursor known to man, and then you can use a dowsing machine for the millionth time in this game. You can use a touchscreen if you're playing in handheld, but honestly, it doesn't really feel the same. I would have preferred it, honestly, if it filled the entire screen instead of being here awkwardly in the corner. Better yet, why not completely revamp it just like the Pokegear in Heart Gold and Soul Silver? I don't know, it just feels like almost anything could have been better than the way it was handled here. Oh, speaking of which, why is the bike controller complete ass? I'm not joking, this is some of the worst time I've spent moving a stick in a recent memory, and I just played through Sonic Forces. Like seriously, the acceleration is way too fast in one mode, and it feels like you're riding through quicksand in the other. Luckily, they increased the overall movement speed while running on the ground, so there's not really a reason to ever use it outside certain sections. Also, come on guys, I was never a fan of the contest, but what the hell is this? I respect the attempt to try something new with them, but this half-assed rhythm game is just not it. At least they made the Grand Underground fun. And here it is, my final criticism, and it's the same one I've been saying for over half a decade now. Please stop putting these games out so often. Back in the day, it was always an event whenever a new Pokemon generation or remake was announced. I specifically remember the community collectively losing their shit when Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were announced. It had been so long, and people had been speculating for the better part of a decade on what these games could be. Now, 7 years, 2 completed generations, and 4 mainline games later, it couldn't be more different. Even me, as a certified Generation 4 nut, when these games were announced, I was just like, yeah, I guess it makes sense, I should probably do that. The most popular criticism lobbed at the franchise that I agree with 100% is that these games have suffered as a direct result of being annual. I feel like a lot of heat from the internet would have been taken off of Pokemon if these games were spaced out even just an extra year apart. Look, I'm not in the whole jerk-off camp of, oh, a rushed game is always bad and a delayed game never said this. From an artistic perspective, it's important to know when to move on from a project and have it be finished and not tweak every little knob until the end of time. And from a business perspective, it definitely makes sense not to have a project in limbo for years and years on end. But come on guys, every year? We're even getting 2 this year! I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to BDSP. It's telling to me the biggest Gen 4 stan this side of degeneracy just thinks that these games are pretty alright. This should have been a slam dunk for someone like me. I should have absolutely loved the BDSP, but they fucked around and found out, and now I only kinda love them. Those motherfuckers. Could you just imagine what this game would have looked like with just a year more of development? They could have been, no debate, best versions of Gen 4, combining the best ideas from both the original Diamond and Pearl and Platinum. I never expected these games to be the biggest AAA open world remake in the history of video games running at 60 FPS 4K graphics. I just expected them to be the best possible versions of the traditional Pokemon formula, but they weren't. They could have added a bunch more quality of life features, made the game faster, made the game look better. I'm not saying that a lot of these people who hate these games will like them after these changes, but it couldn't have hurt them any more than it already did. I'm speaking personally here, but I don't think I've ever seen the public image of Pokemon at a lower level than when BDSP came out. Sure, it was a Megaton bomb when Sword and Shield came out, but at least that was a debate with passionate people on both sides arguing, some would say a little too much, about if the games had merit or not. When BDSP dropped, the vibe was just 100% dismissal. This just in, birds fly, the sky is blue, Pokemon just shit out another shit, we're in an economic recession, just another Wednesday. And the people who liked the game, like me, were just off in their own little corner being like, I like when the Pokeball go click when you catch them. To a lot of people, BDSP marked the time when Pokemon was at its wheel spinningest and were the most alienated when it came to understanding why anyone could ever enjoy this franchise. But wait, what's that? On the horizon? Literally 3 fucking months later? Could it be? Could it be? Could this be the Pokemon game we have been waiting for all these years? Sort of? There are a lot of jokes that Legends Arceus is the second Pokemon game. Ha ha ha. Come on guys, it's actually the 4th. Generations 1 and 2 were ambitious yet buggy and unbalanced RPGs made on a shoestring budget on a device not that much more powerful than a calculator. Generations 3, 4, and 5 gave the games grander, region-spanning stories that had high stakes, introduced 3D elements, messed with the battle formula, and started to tinker with online and wireless features to connect people more with Pokemon. Can you tell this is my favorite era? And then generations 6 through 8 brought the series to full 3D, had fully integrated online features, quality of life features, and camera angles. Ooh. And then we get to Pokemon Legends Arceus, the biggest leap forward in the series yet. Now, did this experiment pay off? Well, let me put it like this. The first 20 or so hours I spent with Pokemon Legends Arceus were nothing short of magical. I was captivated by the deluge of new mechanics and ideas introduced, by the openness of these new areas, by the music, and by the smartly designed gameplay loop. But most of all, I was captivated by the fact that all of this was made by Game Freak! You know, these guys who decided this was a good idea. The people who made this a thing. Who forgot the letter Z? Yeah, that Game Freak made this game. Don't get me wrong, they have made some of my favorite games of all time. But even I can admit they have always had their limitations as developers. I mean, come on guys, it took them over 20 years to develop the ability to look up. Now you're telling me that they put a fucking dodge roll into one of these games? I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Game Freak seemed to have actually done it. They had made an actual new style of Pokemon game that was fun in a new way and captured my imagination more than the franchise had in the past few years. And then, slowly but surely, the farther I got into it, that luster started to fade, and the blemishes the game had became more and more apparent. But again, let's start with the positives I had after my 70-ish hour playthrough. Alright, first order of business, these open areas. My biggest takeaway from Sword and Shield were that the wild areas were really cool and basically everything else about the game needed to go the way of the dodo bird. If you're not aware, that means fucking dead. Not to go on a tangent about a game that has been curb stomped into such a fine pace by the internet that you would mistake it for pesto sauce, but man, these routes and towns are some of the worst they have ever been. X and Y had more complex route design, and one of these routes is literally just a copy and paste of a Viridian forest. Look, the point is, that's the point. Look, the point is that it seemed like Game Freak was putting these elements in out of obligation and not because they necessarily wanted to, when clearly their passion was put into making these open areas where you could encounter Pokemon at any level and it felt like an actual world you were traversing. Enter Legends Arceus, and it looks like I was right. As always, even though it's not an open world in the clearest sense, any one of these areas has much more to discover and experiment with than the wild areas in Gen 8. From the verticality of the Coronet Highlands, to the rough terrain of the Crimson Mirelands, to what is probably my favorite, the Alabaster Icelands, which legitimately feels hostile in both the ferocity of the Pokemon that you can find there and the difficult to traverse terrain which has you using your mounts to their full effect to get around. Each of these areas keep you on your toes the entire game with how many little secrets and hidden crannies you can find in them. Things like finding this Gyarados just flying around in the sky and being able to actually catch it with a well-timed Pokeball was something I just dreamed of being able to do in a Pokemon game when I was a kid. I was so glad Game Freak actually committed to the seeds they had planted in Sword and Shield and its DLC, and followed through with some well-designed open areas. Man, what the hell. You're telling me not only did Game Freak make movement, aiming, and dodge rolling a central mechanic into a mainline Pokemon game, but it actually feels good? Look, I love turn-based JRPGs with all my heart. They are one of my favorite genres for a myriad of reasons, and I often feel like the combat in these games is often overlooked by how fun it can be. Using your brain to chain together the perfect sequence of attacks combined with resource management and menu navigation can really feel good and satisfying. But on the other hand, one of my other favorite genres is movement-based shooters. You know, balls to the wall, high octane, split decision making, palm sweating, vision blurring, mouth drying, mouth flicking, fuck it, shuck it, well, wait, what were we talking about again? Of course this game doesn't necessarily hit the highs of those games, nor is it really trying to, but I think for their first attempt, it feels pretty slick. Especially since what they used to be known for was
Now, there's not anything necessarily wrong with
but once you've seen for the millionth time, really tends to get on your nerve. Okay, that joke got old real quick. Hopefully now we can move on. The dodge roll feels quite good, and dodging overworld Pokemon often gives the average encounter more depth. Sniping Pokemon with the Pokeballs is a ton of fun too. Going on catching sprees gives you the same feeling as getting a particularly good kill streak in a COD game. Also, the backstrike sound effect gives me a hit of dopamine crack cocaine could only wish it could give me. While I may or may not go into a teeny little tangent later on how you obtain these Pokeballs, know that when you do end up having a good supply of them, it feels really good to throw them. Oh, and the bosses are fun, for the most part. Having you go through a bullet hell-esque fight while trying to get in shots when you can. I feel like they could have added more of these given that the majority of legendary mythical Pokemon still can be caught regular style. It would be cool if each of the Lake Guardians, for example, had to be stunned like in these fights to give off the feeling that they are more tough to catch, since there's only one of them.
Alright, well now on to the next positive, which would be the world building.
Hey, spoiler for the negative side of the review, I hate the story! But one thing I really love about the narrative of this game is the way they do the world building. And by that I mostly mean the literal building of Jubilee Village. When you first arrive to the village, it seems to be inhabited by what I like to call dumbass geeks. No one wants anything to do with Pokemon and they are all scared of what they are capable of. Now, on one hand, I would like to say that all these people are lame as for not wanting to catch or interact with these things that I have been thinking about and doodling in my notebooks for most of my life. But on the other hand, if I lived in this world in this time period, I also wouldn't want anything to do with these affronts to God. Wait, God's one of them too? You got sentient rocks that will cave your skull in, bugs the size of you, and actual ghosts that will steal your children? I'm not taking one step outside of my village. But, as Legends Arceus shows, is that over time, slowly, people adapt and change. Doing small tasks for these villagers shows them not only the utility of Pokemon, but you also see the first rumblings of people being interested in researching them, finding the differences in gender, size, and color between forms, wanting to know more about them, wanting to have these creatures as companions, which of course is the baseline for the entire series. Throughout the game, you see Pokemon have a bigger role in these people's lives for the better. People use them as pets, workers, start building entire professions around Pokemon. You are seeing in front of your eyes the seeds being planted that will eventually blossom into the Pokemon world, as we know it now. And as a longtime fan, that's really cool. And what's even cooler is that you see all this change happen as one of the chillest tracks in all of video games plays in the background. Speaking of which, the music. I don't really have much to say here, I just think the music's really good. Alright, that was easy. Now it's time to get into why this game sucks.
No, I guess I do have a few things I want to say about the music, and how it's incorporated into this game.
Fucking stupid video essays. Piggybacking off the previous section,
Jubilife Village's soundtrack is a bit of respite from all the flayings and maulings that go out in the overworld.
it's laid back but not too quiet. Like the villagers are slowly going about their work. Slow but steady change. And then, boom. Oh, you thought that this YouTube video essay wasn't gonna go
10
minutes without talking about a JRPG battle theme? Are you watching this fresh out of your mom's? But seriously, why do both the trainer and wild Pokemon battle themes have to go this hard? It's like the original Gen 4 battle themes took smelling salts and composed Symphony No. 10. I love the new instrumentation and the percussion especially. Add a few hi-hats and bass and that's a fucking Miami booty bass if I've ever heard it.
Now I could list a whole bunch of other songs from this soundtrack and the reasons why I like them, but honestly we'd be here all day and this script is already like 5,000 words long. So what I'll do is that I'll list a few songs on screen and then we can move on with the video, okay?
But one other point about the music I want to highlight is the overworld songs and how they are implemented. One of the many things this game cribbed from Breath of the Wild was how in the overworld 95% of the time there's no background music. But every once in a while in select areas some music will creep in out of nowhere. Now I loved when Breath of the Wild did this, but in my opinion Legends Arceus does it more successfully because A, I just think the music overall is better in general in this game, and B, they remixed a few of the old tracks from the original Diamond and Pearl for some of the overworld songs. I got such a kick out of recognizing some of these songs when they came in game. True story, there may or may not have been a moment early on when I was in the forest and I may or may not have been collecting Pokemon and observing them at a chill pace, and then a new version of Eterna Forest may or may not have come on the exact right time, and I may or may not have cried a little. Good stuff. Okay, now that I'm done praising this game, I can
Okay, no, of course there's more than 4 things I like about this game. But honestly, there's not really much I could say other than, oh yeah, I guess that's pretty cool.
I like how you can take your full team out at once, though I wish they wouldn't go to sleep so fucking fast. Oh, and thank God trade evolutions are gone for good. Wait, Game Freak, please. Please, tell me these. Play Game Freak, please. Tell me that they are gone. Tell me that they are gone. Game Freak, don't tell me!
The mounts are pretty cool, though one definitely is clearly inferior to the others in terms of function. I just wish they had given Ursaluna like another function. Like maybe she could have scared off wild Pokemon if you didn't want to deal with them, since you know, she's a goddamn however pound bear.
Oh, and thank you Game Freak for actually selling us just one version of the game this time. One, so I don't have to use weird grammar that makes it seem like I'm referring to multiple games when in reality they are the same game with marginal differences like I did in the last section.
And two, it's just better for the consumer to have one complete game instead of having to research beforehand which version has which Pokemon. And oh fuck it, I might as well just get both versions anyway. Oh, I'll definitely have the time to play both of these. I definitely won't try to flip the other one for twice its MSRP 12 years later. Nope, I definitely won't do that. What a great industry we have, guys. Yep, this practice is dead and buried, and I won't ever have to deal with it ever again. Oh my god.
Okay guys, positive talk is over. Now it's time for me to tell you guys about how much this game is an absolute, without a shadow of a doubt, steaming pile of... Okay, I do have one more point that I would like to bring up. I'm putting it here because I can't make up my mind on if I like it or not. So, here it goes. The research point system on paper, and sometimes in practice, is something that I love. The way it incentivizes the player to interact with and study Pokemon that not only fits perfectly in the setting, you know, filling out the first Pokedex and all, but also fixes the problem of just catching a Pokemon once and then letting it rot in a box forever, is genius. And I truly respect what they were going for here. But I often found myself butting heads with the system and wanting to love it. But in turn, it just left me cold. First off, you gotta be fucking kidding me, right guys? Why the hell do so many of these tasks go up to such a high number? Did they actually expect people to complete some of these? Who the fuck is gonna kill 40 Paras? I'm pretty sure that'll get you put on a list. Multiply that by almost 300 creatures, and I can only call it one thing: bloated. These lists are so large that when you reach research level 10 on a Pokemon, it barely feels like you accomplished something. It's like, oh great, I filled out 4 of these possible 30 boxes. I'm now an expert on Cascoon, apparently. I'm not talking to you. They seriously needed to trim these down to just about 3 levels per category at max. Like seriously, how is catching 12 Nosepass make you more knowledgeable on Nosepass than catching 6? It's a fucking rock with a nose. I think it's this way to give players more freedom when it comes to getting to research level 10. Like if you have such an aversion to battling with a certain Pokemon, you could just do the catching related ones and call it a day. But at that point, I struggle to see the point of this system in the first place. If you are really trying to research these Pokemon and find out what they're all about, you would think you would have to do more than just catch and feed them, right? You know, do stuff actual biologists do. Study their habits. Observe. I've never been the biggest Pokemon Snap guy. Hell, I don't like the majority of Pokemon spin-offs, but that's a story for a different day. But one thing I really liked about the original was how you get to see Pokemon interacting with their environments. Like animals. Like, come on, they already gave you a goddamn phone in this game, so staying historically accurate is already out of the question. So why not take photos of these Pokemon doing certain actions, being territorial, sleeping, climbing? They kinda got halfway there in this game by having some special side missions for Pokemon that would also give you research points. While these are cool in theory, I ran into a situation many times where I had already gotten research level 10 by the time I encountered one of these missions. Speaking of research level 10, while this game never explicitly tells you you need to get to level 10 on every Pokemon, the game sure as hell pushes that on you. One, you don't get the Pokedex blurb and the little Pokeball symbol next to the Pokemon, so even if you catch every single Pokemon, you could still feel like you barely accomplished anything with all this blank space. And two, the shiny charm is locked behind it. And don't tell me that's not an incentive. They actually made shiny hunting fun in this game. I was dead set on getting a research level 10 on every single Pokemon. I wanted to really sink my teeth into this new system, but again, it feels like I was being punished for caring in the first place. At a certain point, the tasks just bleed into each other. Catch this many, evolve this many, use this move in this style, feed them, see them come out of a tree, defeat this many with this type of move. It just wasn't fun anymore. So, I stopped. I just settled on catching every single Pokemon at least once. The fact that it felt like I was settling for something that in other games in the series would have been a major accomplishment was a bit disappointing to say the least. Again, the research point system was so enticing to me and got my hopes so high that when it burned me, it left me feeling so enigmatic. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I appreciated and respected the effort so much, but if you asked me point blank to give my thoughts on it, as of me writing the script, I would say I straight up just don't like it, which is a little sad if you ask me, but it's not unsalvageable. Here's how I would fix it. Like I said before, tone down the amount of tasks. There's no person on earth that needs to catch 50 Burmy. The next idea is a little vague, but I already gave an example in the form of the Pokemon Snap idea earlier. What I want is more variety on how we fill out these research tasks. Have us experiment, think outside the box, make us feel like we are actually studying these Pokemon. Now I know that may seem like a tall order for as many Pokemon they put in these games nowadays. So I have one last suggestion that would remedy this somewhat. Have the research apply to an entire evolutionary line instead of an individual Pokemon. This way you don't have to create an intricately designed task for every single Pokemon. I can see maybe some exceptions to this, such as the Eevee line, but cases like that are so far and few between, you really wouldn't run into that problem too much. So yeah, that's the research system. I had some thoughts about it, some good, some bad, but now it's on to the next segment. Wait, what was that again? Oh right. Alright, the story and characters. When this game was originally going through its review cycle and I saw that the story in particular was getting bashed, I honestly paid it no mind. I mean, it's Pokemon, of course the story isn't good. I know the score. It'll be perfectly mediocre at best with a good set of characters and I'll move on with my life. But man, I was not prepared for this. My problem with the story of Legends Arceus is not that it's demonstrably worse than the plots of other games in the series, but that there's so much of it and it squanders the potential of the initial setup of the game. Right off the bat, I was not sold on the premise. Being isekai'd into the Hisui region from the future was a really weird choice for me. I would have much preferred if it was just set in that setting from the outset. I think it was presented like this because fish out of water setups are a good and easy way to introduce people to that world and the rules of that world. But I think you could still have the player character be unfamiliar with Hisui without the need for the time travel aspect. Hisui, being based on Japan, is a region with strong coastal infrastructure. You even see some visitors and immigrants from other regions in Jubilife. Why not have the player character be one of them? Why not have them set off from their hometown in search of adventure in a new and untamed land? It would have been way more in theme with the rest of the game while still being in touch with the roots of the series. You can even still do the whole Arceus talking to you bit with the ARC phone and stuff. It would have been even more mysterious and cool if it was introduced this way. The way it was set up here is just like, oh, I guess Arceus just picked up this random preteen from the future to solve this problem in the past. That's weird. It's just the fact that they have you wash up on a beach with amnesia, just like so many other games, including the Mystery Dungeon games, that rubbed me the wrong way. Honestly, as I'm writing this, I'm struggling to find ways to communicate why I dislike the story in this game so much. Again, Pokemon has never been known for its excellent storytelling, so why does it bother me so much here? I've sat through a lot, and I mean a lot of dialogue in games. Hell, RPGs are one of, if not my favorite genres. I played through Persona 5 3 separate times and never got tired of the dialogue. As I'm writing this script right now, I'm playing through Mass Effect and loving it. I think it just comes down to how unavoidable, and most importantly, how boring it all is. Take for instance this reoccurring scene with the mochi cook. This scene plays out the exact same way every time. They eat mochi, talk about the Pokedex or research or some shit, and then it ends. Who gives a shit? Like seriously, this game is littered with cutscenes like this. There's about 6 hours of dialogue in this game, and about 4 hours of that is absolutely not essential. It's not interesting, it's not informative, and it's not entertaining. I can go through the entire thing, but there would be no point. It would just be a bunch of, yeah, this person said this, don't care. Uh-oh, this Pokemon goes wild. Better take care of that. Also don't care. I could talk about the Diamond and Pearl clan and how I rolled my eyes when they came into the story. And my exasperated face when they became main players in the story and wouldn't shut up!
Come on, Side-Eye. You're starting to come off as one of those gaming rant channels. You don't want that.
I think having some of the characters be ancestors to characters in other games is kinda cool, but honestly I don't see them more than just a little Easter egg for longtime fans. It's cool, but it doesn't sell me on the entire plot, you know?
There are a million things I can nitpick about the plot, but for me its biggest sin was being boring and me having to interface with that black hole of storytelling so much.
Hey, speaking of boring, one of the main complaints that people have with the JRPG genre that I hear all the time is that they contain too much grinding. And I can get that. I get how tedious fighting the same enemies over and over just to gain an increasingly minuscule amount of XP can be. But here's the thing, with very few exceptions, modern JRPGs don't really have any grinding to them anymore. Game designers have gotten a lot smarter about the EXP curve and dole it out in a way that assures you don't stay in an area for more than you want to. The only exception I can think of is Yakuza Like a Dragon, maybe?
And honestly, in that game, I only really grinded to take on the super boss in the post game. The rest of the game I felt adequately leveled.
With that being said, I find it funny that the Pokemon getting all the praise right now for being a leap forward for the series has literally the most grinding in any Pokemon game. Now I hear you saying,
Side-Eye, what are you talking about? I never had to grind levels in Legends Arceus. And that's when I would say,
ha! You fell for my trick! I wasn't talking about EXP when I said grinding, I was actually talking about this shit! The crafting system, much like other things I came to kinda dislike about this game, started out really engaging. I loved buying new recipes and seeing what each item did, and how to incorporate them into the gameplay loop. For the unfamiliar, Pokemon Legends Arceus often gives you resources for doing various actions. You can find them lying on the ground, in trees, oh god! As rewards for certain side quests, by catching or defeating Pokemon, and even in these convenient mineral deposits. Oh god! Wait, is that a shiny? Man, this game is good. You can use these resources to craft various items, such as Pokeballs, Smoke Bombs, Sticky Globs, Star Pieces to sell.
Hey, hi, this is Editing Side-Eye here. You can also craft Stealth Spray, that's also pretty useful.
And literally nothing else because they have little to no actual use. It's clear they designed this system to have a bunch of tools and trinkets for the players to experiment with, but 90% of the stuff you can craft is basically useless. The recovery items have little to no use since a full heal is often a quick fast travel away. And other items like Scatterbangs, I literally don't know why they're in the game. Like, who is using these? I can see them maybe being useful if you were being targeted by a strong Pokemon, but no, they work only against weaker ones. But that I could deal with. Every item not having the exact same amount of utility among each other is understandable. But what I can't understand is the amount of resource grinding you have to do to craft these items. If you're playing the way the game expects you to, you're gonna need hundreds upon hundreds of Pokeballs to get through a playthrough. The game rewards you for catching a ton of Pokemon, in money, in research points, and in the survey core level. So on an average expedition, you will need a surplus of Pokeballs. And I just don't think the game gives you nearly enough. I cannot describe the amount of times my enjoyment of the game was put to a dead stop because I had ran out of Pokeballs. And sure, you can purchase either the materials to make them or the Pokeballs wholesale with money, but you make so little of it, especially in the early to mid game, it rarely seems worth it. I'm not saying that they should have given us an infinite amount of them, but I think it would have been wise to have a better access to at least the base Pokeball type. There were so many times I was on a great expedition. I caught a bunch of Pokemon, explored a lot, gathered materials, only to get back to camp and find out I only had enough materials for 20 Pokeballs? You fucking sneezed 20 Pokeballs in this game. So you know what I did? I grinded.
I checked every mineral deposit. Why does this keep happening?
Every crate, every tree, oh god, beach, and field for any type of resource I could find. This is the most grinding I've ever had to do in one of these games, since maybe the Elite Four in Gen 2. And honestly, this may be worse, because at least back then it was standardized in the genre. Now so many RPGs try to lessen the grind as much as possible, and it was so disappointing to see this level of it in this game. But hey, at least your Pokemon gain XP every time you get materials or catch a Pokemon. Surely that won't cause any problem. So the final boss of this game is kind of fucking awesome. Volo, I'm still not sure how to pronounce it. Most likely takes the cake for the most unique, cinematic, and difficult boss fight in the franchise. The way you have to beat his entire fully evolved stack team and then take on both forms of Giratina, all with no breaks, is honestly exhilarating. Sure, you could see the twist coming from a mile away, but for a Pokemon game, I thought it was handled pretty masterfully. There's only one problem here. In my game, my team was all leveled into their 80s, and I had no problem against this fight. Yeah, there's a reason I didn't mention this in the positive section.
While I still appreciate the gravitas and theatrics of this fight, I'd be lying if I said I didn't beat this first try with no struggle on my part. But Side-Eye! And there's the straw man again. Why did you purposefully over-level your team?
Okay, here's the thing, I didn't. You know that little issue I brought up 2 minutes ago? The grinding. Yeah, good times. Yeah, that's why. I swear I never sought out once to overlevel any of the Pokemon in my team. I just played the game the way it wanted me to. I was filling up research tasks, catching Pokemon, getting resources. All of these tasks, in one way or another, give you XP for your whole team. You know the experience share? That thing people always complain about in every game it's in? I, for one, never minded it. Sure, I think it's stupid when they don't give you the option to turn it off, but I think it's a huge quality of life feature for the traditional style of Pokemon game. I mean, the way it used to work is that every time you caught a new Pokemon for your team, you couldn't actually use it for at least an hour or two. You'd have to lead with the new Pokemon every time you enter a new battle, switch to your actually good Pokemon to do the battling, get the minuscule amount of XP from that, continue this process until the Pokemon is somewhat useful, and then repeat the entire thing all over again when you get a new one. Frankly, I've done that shit enough times to fill up 20 lifetimes. So, in short, the experience share is a net positive for the series in my opinion. Just please leave the option to turn it off in the game. Jesus Christ, it's not rocket science. So am I saying that the experience share should have been removed from Legends Arceus? Hell no. It's still a quality of life feature, and at this point it's so integrated in this game it's not even given a name. It's just a fact of life like taxes and conception. Should the amount of XP be greatly reduced to give you more of a challenge in the late game? Again, no. While I do think the way I had been playing up to that point was strongly encouraged by the game, most people aren't going to be so anal about the amount of Pokemon they've reached level 10 with, or running out of Pokeballs trying to catch 80 Honchkrows in a row. So I think for the vast majority of the player base, the level curve is actually well paced, and I wouldn't want to ruin that experience for others. Oh, I know, Side-Eye. You want
difficulty option.
No! Into the quarantine zone with you! Not opening that can of worms! Oh no! The toxic fumes are getting into my lungs! Time to use the only solution I know! Segue into a seemingly unrelated game that has a feature that would work pretty well in this one. Introducing Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. It's also a big open RPG that has a lot of things to do and a lot of XP to dole out. So much in fact, a common complaint of the original version was that doing too much would make the game incredibly easy due to the fact that every single fucking thing gives you XP. Killing monsters and super bosses, completing quests, talking to people, you get a lot of it fast. Now, this is fine for a normal person just casually going through the game, but to gamer gremlins such as myself, who like to scratch every corner of these games, it makes the game so easy that you might as well put the controller down in battle. Luckily, in the definitive version of this game, they introduced an expert mode option. Now what does that do, you might ask? That's right, I know what you're thinking, you little shit. Expert mode allows you to de-level yourself at will, so you can fine-tune your level for your current area. You can either level down if you want a bit more of a challenge, or give the levels back to your character if you're having trouble with a certain fight. I think this would have been a perfect option for me in Legends Arceus. Hell, there's already experience candies in the game, so why not be able to turn your Pokemon's levels into candy to store for later use? They wouldn't have even had to add any more unique assets to the game. It's weird because I often don't mind feeling overpowered in RPGs. If I do all the work to do all of these side quests and exploration, I better be able to two-shot the final boss. But for some reason, I don't feel this way here. I think it's because my favorite game franchise finally added a challenging boss after however many years. And no, I don't count Ultra Necrozma. I always felt like that boss was overrated as hell. Anyways, they added another tough as hell boss to one of the most notoriously easy game franchises of all time, only for me to beat it no problem, due to the game encouraging me to grind and overlevel my team. Something about that just bugs me. Maybe I played it wrong, maybe this is the game's way of telling me to switch out my team more, or to save all of the research task stuff for the post-game. But that's just not how I played it. I'm no game designer. Maybe there's no way to avoid the situation I was put in during the Volo fight. I'm just one guy, giving my thoughts on what I experienced with this ambitious yet flawed game. I guess that's just the point of this section ultimately. As a longtime fan, I'm so glad to see Game Freak finally try something new with this formula. And yet the ways in which it stumbles just left me cold. Like it was actively pushing back on the kind of player I am. And that's a bit disappointing, to say the least. And yeah, those are all the major points I wanted to bring up about Plah. There are a few extra things I could talk about. For example, the graphics. What's the word? Fine. Yeah, it's clear that they could have been better. I would say that for 85% of the game, it looks serviceable to kind of beautiful. My favorite aspect of the game graphically is by far the skybox during the nighttime. God damn. But man, the other 15%, on the other side, I would say my least favorite thing graphically in this game is this weird artifacting that goes on around the player and other entities when you're in a cave.
I did notice lit cave entrances produce visual artifacts around a character. These are often bright flickering pixels, and at first you might mistake this for a kind of bug.
Yeah, that. I would say that the visuals look very flat and bad in general when it's dark out. Like something just doesn't look quite right about it. I'm also kind of on the fence about the environmental design in general in this game. Like I sometimes can't figure out if they're often flat and drab to give off an old and untamed land, blank canvas for society kind of feel, or if they're flat and drab because Game Freak couldn't figure out how to make a fucking hill at this one spot. Also, there's a new battle mechanic. The strong and agile styles and moves. They're also, the word escaped me again, fine. They add somewhat of an amount of complexity to battles, being somewhat inspired by Bravely Default's battle system, just not as much as I would have wanted. In my opinion, the agile style moves are the more interesting ones, giving up damage for faster speed. And if the Pokemon has a high enough speed stat, you can sometimes do a move like 4 times in a row. Then the strong style moves I can kind of take or leave. I feel like most of the time they just make sure that a move that would one-shot a Pokemon doubly one-shots a Pokemon. Yeah, you give up turns for the added damage, but most of the time the Pokemon you already attacked is already tomato paste by the time that starts to be a problem. I think there's not enough trade-off. My solution would be to add a chance to get recoil damage or confusion from strong moves. And there it is, my somewhat less quick review of Pokemon Legends Arceus. The game definitely is not perfect, and it left me frustrated at a lot of points. But man, I can't help but still love this stupid grindy game to some degree. Because at the end of the day, I can feel the love and attention put into it. Like take for example, the fact that each mythical and legendary Pokemon has a unique side quest that pays tribute to its in-game lore and mythos. And man, if that's not an example of what's been missing in modern Pokemon lately. Little details like that are part of what I love about this series. And hey, here's another compliment. The end of the Daybreak update that they added post-launch actually leaves the game off on a sweet note that actually made me care about the characters. So I don't necessarily have all the animosity I once felt for the narrative anymore. Going forward, I don't think I'll stop having problems with this game, but I'll also appreciate it for what it did right, and what a breath of fresh air it is for the series. Okay, this review is getting generic, time for the next section.
God, this script is 10,000 words long now. What the hell happened? As I mentioned earlier in the series,
I played through BDSP and Legends Arceus somewhat concurrently. I would play up to a certain section in one game and trade off to another. I beat BDSP, then marathon the rest of Arceus, and went back and finished up the post-game of BDSP. Now, why did I do this? Was it some grand experiment to compare and contrast these two games and find out which one is the better artistic statement? Nope, it's because these games released too fucking close to each other and I hadn't gotten around to BDSP by the time Legends Arceus came out. But unintentionally, playing these games this way did have an effect on me that wouldn't have happened if I had just done it regular style. During my playtime, I really started to reflect on the series in a way I hadn't before. All of the past generations and where it had led to right in this moment. Standing right before me was a game I would have killed for as a kid. Being able to roam around a big landscape,
catching Pokemon out in the overworld and exploring the environment, but I wasn't really enjoying it all that much more than the safe traditional remake that was BDSP.
Was there something wrong with me? Every game has flaws, and most of the time I can look past them. In fact, I think on average, I prefer if a game is a little fucked up. The example that always comes to mind for me when I think about this is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. This is a fantastic platformer. The graphics are phenomenal, everything is polished to the best it could be. There are basically no flaws I can think of with this game.
But I wouldn't say that it's one of my favorite games of all time or anything, or that I even think about it all that much, even though I did everything in it and platinumed it.
Now, take a game like Super Mario Sunshine. This game is unfinished. The physics don't work all the time. There are a bunch of glitches.
The component or what we did, but I'm... What?
And some of the stages just suck complete ass.
But man, despite it all, I still love this game. And I definitely do think about it more often than I do Ratchet & Clank.
For me, imperfections often draw me toward media. I don't like sanded, polished edges. I want what looks like a team of people scraping by to get a project that they are passionate about off the ground and out the door despite the many constraints that may be placed on them. In my opinion, it is in these situations where some of the best art of all time is created. When the pressure is on, you have no time to dwell on the fine details. Push through those obstacles and say what you want to say, make what you want to make the art that you love. Wait, what does this have to do with Pokemon? Legends Arceus is one of these games, I believe. There's been some conflicting reports, but it's said that this game was headed by a smaller, newer team within Game Freak. They were basically tasked with creating a weird, experimental game with the biggest media franchise in the world with what was probably a heavy time constraint. Now, the issue of labor in the games business with crunch and the exploitation of QA is a whole other can of worms that I don't want to downplay. So, as a blanket statement, I want to say that crunch is a totally bullshit practice that has plagued the industry for too long. I 100% think that they should unionize. I won't speculate further on the development of this game, even though Japan in particular has a very bad problem with this, so it would be safe to assume. But I will say that Legends Arceus, much like most Pokemon games in recent years, seems like a rush job. Many things about this game are clearly not the most fleshed out versions of themselves. Maybe that's it, maybe that's the key to why I feel this way. The fact that Game Freak came so far with this game, but fell so short of what really mattered. And that's the pace these games have been coming out lately. Like I outlined in an earlier section, at a certain point the mainline Pokemon games became an annualized franchise. I won't get into how this has made the quality of the game suffer because of it again, but I bring it up to say this. These games will not ever be truly great again if this pattern continues. Going back to what I would rate these two games, that I expertly foreshadowed earlier in the video by the way, I would give both BDSP and Legends Arceus a 7 out of 10. For comparison, here's what I would rate the rest of the series. Do you see what went on here? During the GBA and DS era, I believe Game Freak were on their A game, creating classic after classic, and then the 3D era started. And while all these games are good, some even really good, and have their own merits, I wouldn't ever compare them to this era. Now, I can admit that this is a heavily biased take. I was in my prime Pokemon playing years during generations 3 through 5, but I don't know, man. I remember being super excited for X and Y at the age of 13, and even back then I didn't play them as much as I thought I would. My point being is that something changed with the franchise at a certain point. The games started coming out faster. Generations lasted shorter. It felt like the series was being controlled by either Nintendo or the Pokemon Company into pumping out new generations, games, merchandise, Pokemon, and trading cards at an alarming rate. My dream Pokemon game has never been an open world adventure with a real-time combat system and fucking 80 regions that you can tackle in any order and there's a dark, edgy story. No, man. I just wanted the same kind of Pokemon game with a little less linearity, with all the quality of life features you can expect from a big budget JRPG a la Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. In fact, Dragon Quest XI is a perfect example of what I want for Pokemon. Under the hood of this game, it's essentially the same kind of game they've been making since the 80s. But there's been so much time, care, and effort put into almost every little detail. Battles can take place anywhere. Combat is fast and fluid. You can speed up battles as much as you want. There are a billion different difficulty modifiers you can toggle to fine-tune your experience. Costumes, side quests, open exploration, voice acting.
You do what you need to do.
Music options. All that and the story and characters are all great while still keeping a whimsical tone that isn't too serious. If there's any game I want a new Pokemon to be like, it's this one. But I'm not sure if I'll ever get it. With the schedule Game Freak has been placed under, I'm not confident they will ever get the chance to make that game, even if they want to. And I'm really curious on what's next. How much of Legends will carry over to the next game? Have the team working on the new generation learned from the team who worked on Legends? If so, how much of that will be incorporated into this one? I guess there's no way to know now. Wait, what? What the fuck? Oh my god. It's open world Pokemon. It's open world Pokemon. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, that fucking Meowth. Oh, the Sojourner. Oh my god. It's non-linear Pokemon. It's what I've wanted the entire time. They're doing. Oh god, the Survivor. Oh god, the Larvitar. Oh, is this region based on Spain? This is crazy. What the hell? What the fuck? What? Oh my god, what's that? Oh! Scarlet and Violet? They're going back to colors now? What the fuck? Oh, wait, there's two professors now? What the hell? Oh, Fuecoco, my boy. Well, oh my god, there's so many locations. Oh! Wait, hold on. What's this? Hold up. Oh my god, there's a red and there's a violet one. Oh, it's like it's Scarlet and Violet. That's like it's the name of the game. Oh, that's the box art. That looks really cool actually. I like the designs of those. Oh, come on!
Yeah, this video has been in production for a little while.
Well, those games look pretty good, yeah. So, first order of business, that release date. Please refer to the previous section because I'm not going over to why I think releasing two big Pokemon games in the same year is maybe not the best idea. Second, it seems like instead of the open zones that were in Legends, the game is actually going to be fully open world this time. And in their own words, you can explore at your leisure and not in any order dictated by the story. I'm not exactly sure what this means. Can you do every gym or this game's equivalent to gyms in any order? Or does that mean that no area is roadblocked off, but you still need to do the badges in the predetermined order? Only time can really tell, but judging by this being one of the big selling points, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's the former. And if that's the case, that's great. One of my favorite Pokemon related videos on this site is Funk's one on the pacing of the series, and how maybe these games aren't that well paced, especially on replay. This could potentially get rid of this problem, and make one of the most replayable games in the series. Now, there's the issue of what's coming over from Arceus, and well, to be honest, it seems like not much. Now, most of this is speculation on my part, but one thing I'm confident in is that catching Pokemon in the overworld is gone. The only time you see one being caught is in this shot, and yeah, that's super in battle. That combined with the fact that you never see the character roll or do anything else except walk around makes me think that all the movement stuff did not carry over. Now I could be wrong, but in my opinion I think that they would have shown off those features if they were going to be in. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little disappointing, but honestly it's not that big of a deal for me. That stuff was cool in Arceus, but it's not what I come to this series for. I'm much more interested in the structure of this game. No sign of research tasks, but honestly it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to be there. Since this is the present, the Pokédex records all that shit instantly. Speaking of present, back to two different versions I see. Now I'm seeing speculation that there may actually be more version differences this time around. I mean look, the main character's pants are different. No, I'm talking about each version of the game having a different professor. One obviously having an ancient looking design and the other a futuristic one. The past and future seem to have a big role to play in these games. Just like this video! Like, there's speculation saying that the two legendaries are actually the same Pokemon, just at different time periods. Maybe one game will have a section in the past, the other will have one in the future. There's a lot that they could do with this idea. But come on guys, you just proved that you can make a self-contained Pokemon game with just one version. I don't know, it just kind of feels like a kick in the nuts. Any smaller points? The starters. Fuecoco is clearly the best and Sprigatito is clearly the worst. Moving on. There seems to be a bigger focus on multiplayer in this game, and judging by how that went in Sword and Shield, oh, jury's still out.
Hey, hi, editing siideeye here, and over the course of making this video, a few more things have been known about Scarlet and Violet that I wanted to go over. Now, I was scared at first that any new information that we would find out about these games would invalidate or date the stuff that I was talking about in this video, but luckily that doesn't seem to be the case. So there's really just a few things I wanted to go over with this new direct and this new trailer. And honestly, after watching this trailer, I'm gonna double down on the stuff that I was talking about. I think all of the Legends Arceus movement stuff is basically 100% gone. I feel like if that was in the game, they would have shown it by now. So I think absolutely no catching Pokemon in the overworld and no dodge rolling or anything like that. And probably no research tasks, if I would have to guess. I would imagine if that was a major mechanic in these games, they would have shown it, especially since this is like the big direct that they're doing before the release of the game. So yeah, I guess one other thing I wanted to touch on is just the overall structure of the game and how I'm even more interested in how they're gonna do it. Yeah, because looking through the trailer a couple times and reading the website, the terminology and the wording they're using is really interesting and confusing at the same time. Because, okay, first off, they're really driving home this 3-story thing, with, you know, them highlighting one of the stories being the traditional gym battles. And that really makes me think what those other 2 stories are going to be. And I want to keep my hopes up. I want to believe that those 2 other stories are going to be just as interesting as the gym battles. But part of me is scared that that only means, like, one story will be the evil team and the other one will be, you know, the fucking legendary stuff. And it just has this vibe of them toting something that's gonna be brand new, instead of when it's really just gonna be kind of the same stuff, just packaged differently. Like, I would love if the 2 other stories were 2 completely unrelated challenges that had their own mechanics and, like, maybe mini games attached to it. Maybe they can expand on something like the Grand Underground, for example, and have this massive area that you can dig and explore with your Pokemon and raise their stats in that way, or like what they did with the Pokeathlon in Heart Gold Soul Silver, something like that. But my fear is that that's just their, like, fancy naming structure for the other story elements, like the evil team, and like their plan and the villain, and then the 3rd story is actually the Pokemon Championship, and it just has me worried. But I guess moving on to the other part where they're saying that you can challenge any gym in any order, they've clarified a few things on that. Apparently, none of the gyms actually scale to your level, and that is something that I have gone back and forth on a lot. And I think on one hand, I'm a little bummed out because of that, because I think that'll limit the originality of each playthrough or each replay. Having every gym be the same level kind of I don't know, it kind of defeats the purpose a little bit of having like a completely open world. But on the other hand, I think it probably is the smart decision, considering that, you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that can go wrong with an open world game where you have these 8 different challenges that each have to scale, and there's like, what, I'm like, quick math, that's like maybe like 60 something different possibilities you can go in. Or no, it would be more than 60. It would be a whole lot more than 60, actually. It would be an exponential amount of different permutations of each playthrough. So I think, in a way, it is a smart decision. And I think it is still a positive thing for the series. I think it can still allow for a lot of originality in how you tackle the region. And especially, you know, going back to the other stories, maybe the other stories can be tackled in a similar way. So, I guess it's just wait and see. I think there's still a lot that they are not showing about these games, and that they are purposefully keeping a little to the chest when it comes to what is really going on in these games. Because I feel like if they were not confident in what they had, they would just show everything. The fact that they are still being a little precautious on what they are showing means that they know that they have something special. Hopefully. Okay, this section is getting rambly as hell. I just wanted to hop in here and, you know, splooge those few thoughts on the new Scarlet and Violet information. Just, this series has a death grip on my mind. I'm telling you guys. Yeah. What the fuck was I talking about in the main video? You're about to find out. Back to me.
And yeah, that's Scarlet and Violet. Obviously, there's still not a whole lot known about them despite 2 full trailers. So as responsible consumers, we should wait for new information to accumulate so we can make smart purchasing decisions. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm gonna buy this shit day 1 either way. Probably gonna get the double pack like a dumbass. While it still may not seem like the polished Pokemon game I want, I think there's plenty of potential in these games. So, I am looking forward to them. Then again, I said the same thing about Sword and Shield, so what the fuck do I know? Okay, let's wrap it up. So after all that, what's the point of this video? I don't know, man, I just wanted to talk about Pokemon! I've spent so much of my time playing and thinking about this series
That I couldn't not make an hour-and-a-half long series about it.
I guess if I were to pull some semblance of a thesis from this mess, it would be this. Both BDSP and Legends Arceus represent the best and worst the series has to offer. It's crazy that these games were released within months of each other when they're on polar opposites of the spectrum of mainline Pokemon games. One being a traditional, safe, but ultimately really fun remake of a classic, and the other being a wild, strong step forward for the series, despite its multiple fumblings. I guess my point is that, can't we maybe just smush these 2 games together? Would it be too much to ask for in an experimental game that takes some bold, new decisions, while also harkening back to what made people like me fall in love with it in the first place? I think it can be done, but in my opinion, it would take some reshuffling at Game Freak and how they pace their development. I would love to see a gap of at least like 2 years between games after Scarlet and Violet come out, just as a lark. I think the results may be surprising. Game Freak has proved that they can make 10 out of 10 games in the past, and I think with just a little bit more time, it can happen again, but that's not up to me. I will continue to love Pokemon with all my heart. Look, I was indoctrinated from a young age. I'll take my fandom of the series to the goddamn grave. But as the releases keep coming and I see glimmers of great ideas that were botched by time constraints, I can't help but feel disappointed. For as many problems as they may have, I will take my experience with these 2 games and look forward to what the series has to offer in the future. Wait, hold on. Seems like I missed criticism from my Legends Arceus review. Silly me. Surely it isn't anything too massive.
They changed the menu button from X to down on the D-pad, and it still trips me up to this day.
Oh hell! What the fuck? Throw it away! Ain't 0 out of 10. Fucking burn it all down. What the